We'll now talk a little about communication and strategic interactions in the organization. Communication is extremely important, as I'm sure you all understand. You need to make sure that everybody in your organization shares the same information and has the same level of understanding of what goes on. Many organizations, unfortunately, don't share enough or information, and it's important that if you want people to be on the same page as far as the values and the long-range plans and the mission and the vision, you need to communicate openly about everything that's going on. Think about how you want to communicate. If you have a big organization, people in multiple locations and so on, you need to think about what are the tools that you want to use. And the tools really depend on the urgency and the content of what it is that you want to do. What I mean by that is that sometimes you need to act quickly on a situation. A number of cities have so-called kill lists where animals that come in through animal control only have so long before action has to be taken because there are new animals coming in and there's only so much space. This is an urgent situation you want to deal with, and you may want to use tools such as texting or video conferencing and so on, where you can get directly in contact with the people that you want to interact with. Acting on the kill list is actually a good example. You may only have a few hours to mobilize your volunteers, your foster parents, other rescue organizations, and so on to make them help in this. So you need to make sure that you can get in touch with them immediately. They know how you're going to do this. You share the tools that you want to use, and you send them the requisite information quickly and simply. Other situations are really call more for rich communication. You want to make a video. You want to take great pictures and videos of animals. You want it to be compelling. So you put a lot of effort into the production of this, but the urgency can't be as high because you want to make sure it is done properly and that it's delivered in a way where you can appeal in a deep manner to people. So this is really a continuum. Think about different tools that you may want to use for communication. In some cases, if you have everybody in one building, calling people together and having everybody in one room can be very effective, but other times that's not possible. So what is the media you're using and how do you use that in order to get the right message out? Second, think about the communication that matters in your organization. Some of this is really operating information. What happens on a day-to-day basis? What are the things that you need to do your day-to-day job? What are the metrics that you use in order to run your organization, and what do you do about those? Other are more long-term. You have projects that you're working on for months on end, and you may not need to look at it all the time. And then some are strategic, where you just want to make sure that what it is that you're doing really ties into your strategic plans. So developing an operating model where you work with all these elements and where you understand how each of them is handled is very important. I like an operating model where you have daily stand-up meetings. Daily stand-up meetings is really getting together, and the reason they're called stand-up is that you want to make it short and you want to make sure that things is delivered very rapidly. So getting the people that are involved, and typically I would meet with people reporting directly to me, and then have each of them deliver what is the daily status, what are the problems that we are dealing with right now, what happened in the last 24 hours, what are the things we want to happen in the next 24 hours, and if any of the metrics that we're using show us that we are not doing the right thing, how do we respond to that? And really just go around the table, each person spend a couple of minutes on where they are. By doing this, you avoid having to deal with interruptions all the time because people know that you're going to be meeting on a daily basis, and they know that they can get your attention and get help from their team members in solving their day-to-day problems. There's a great example of this in Maddie's shelter medicine program. It's called the Daily Rounds. In this, the veterinarians look at the animals that are in the shelter and they ask a number of questions. So the first question is, who are you? Do we understand, is the animal the right animal? Is it, do we have identification? Do the cage cards match what it is that's going on? And do we really truly understand the profile of this particular animal? Second, how are you? What is the medical situation? What's the behavioral situation of the animal? What are the symptoms that the animal is showing? Next, are you where you should be? If the animal is sick, is it in the general population? If it's a neonatal kitten or puppy, is there a risk of disease for being housed with older animals and so on? Next, do you need something today? Does the animal need veterinary care? Does it need enrichment? Does it need a break in a foster home? Does it need different housing, different behavior modification and so on? So by doing these questions, of posing these questions ongoing, you really get a very quick understanding of what is the status in your shelter and how do you want to deal with it. Moving on, I talked about technical communication. It's really communication around projects. The initiatives that you're dealing with, how do you want to handle those? Typically, having a weekly check-in with your projects is okay. However, inside each project, people definitely need to meet on a daily basis. They need to have the daily stand-ups. They need to understand what everybody is doing so they can respond to that. But you as a manager or leader in the organization, you don't need to be there all the time. You need to depend on people bringing their problems to you. And if a weekly cadence is not enough, you may need to do it differently. But occasional check-ins is better there. And then lastly, strategic communication. You want to make sure you go out and make sure everybody is still aligned. Quarterly meetings with everybody talking about, are we on plan with the strategy? What are the big initiatives? What is going on in the organization and so on works quite well. You want to talk openly. I mentioned this before. Openness and honesty is really important. You want to have an environment of accountability, and openness and honesty is a key element of accountability in an organization. One other element that's really important when you think about communication is the theory of touch points. So if you think about how you interact with your customer, and here in your shelter setting, a customer can be an animal, or a customer can be an adopter, it can be a foster parent, it can be a donor. Your touch points are the interactions that you have with those customers. And people's opinion, in the case of the animals, what they take away and how they behave, is very much based on those touch points. So it's important that you have touch points that are representing the organization and that is a good experience. So touch points is really the interaction that you want to focus on. You want to make sure that the people who are on your front line are people that know how to interact with your customer. People who deal with the animals are your volunteers that know how to deal with animals. So having the right kind of skills on that front line creates a whole different experience for the people that you interact with. And the more positive that experience is, the better your interaction with your customers are, and the better is the outcome. So especially with donors are always important. If they have a very positive experience every time they talk to someone in the organization, chances are they'll give on an ongoing basis. Another portion of communication is really dealing with the change. I mentioned this before, that you need to understand, you need to be ready for what happens when changes happen. And you need to have clear change management plans. Change management in an organization really means understand what is changing and try to anticipate how people are going to react to this. As I mentioned, open and honest communication is a key element of this, but you also want to make sure that you understand, have people really understood the message that you're trying to deliver. If you're going through a major change in the organization, you can be sure that not everybody is in the same place. There are people that will already have anticipated the change, they are ready for it, they are willing, they are the leaders in your organization. You need to take advantage of them, you need to make sure that they help everybody else. But there are always going to be laggers. There are going to be people who are resisting to change, or they're just uncomfortable with a particular change that you're maybe trying to make. And you want to make sure that you bring them along and you understand that maybe different types of communication to different groups is appropriate at times, so you can make sure that everybody follows along during the change. You also need to make sure that you listen carefully. Listen to people, make sure that you understand what are their sentiments, what are their issues with what's coming up, what is it they don't like about the change you're trying to instill, and make sure you take that into account as you go forward and roll out initiatives in the organization. And lastly, how do you communicate? Too many organizations are very hierarchical. You think of yourself as you're the leader in the organization, and you need to speak to people individually because they have different needs and so on. Think instead of yourself as one of the spokes in the organization. You're not necessarily the hub, and you don't need every interaction to be with an individual or individual group and so on. You need the organization to take care of a lot of this communication itself, and you're just one of the parts of that communication. So you need to make sure that you use the informal leaders, and you need to make sure that the communication happens across all elements and with all necessary tools.